Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am here today with one of the brains of the art scene in Nelson Mandela Metro and in South Africa. Recently, Uthando Baduza and his colleagues, they went to France and they've done so many different things there, and I want to know, I cannot not start there. Sorry, Uthando, but just before we start, please welcome to Olomungwazi podcast. That's the name so far.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I was part of a program called Courants du Monde. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly, but
Okay.
it's an initiative that is driven by the French presidency and through the French Minister of Culture. But it's one of those presidential projects. And what this project seeks to do is to, invite art professionals from different countries, from Latin America, from the Americas, from the Middle East, from Africa, to France to engage with French professionals across different disciplines. I mean, our seminar was focused on the organization of temporary exhibitions and the circulation of cultural goods within African institutions. So we had about 12 African professionals from various African countries participating in the program. But the Courants du Monde program in its entirety has different components. So this was one component, and others would, focus on town planning, turning derelict spaces into art spaces. So and others would focus on, your more practice. So there will either be plays with a dance company or with a theater company. So it's various art professionals engaging in different, engagements across over a period of 2 weeks in Paris.
And before people ask why you, Uthando Baduza, did a BA in political studies first, and then he went to work for District 6 Museum in Cape Town. And from there, he developed this love for art and heritage and archives and things like that. He went to study an advanced diploma to further his studies, and went again also to do his master's at UWC in arts history.
In public and visual history.
Public and visual history.
Yes.
And from there, things just happened. You worked for HSRC, where you were focusing largely as a researcher in arts and culture. Then you also grew into commissioning editor in some of the work that they did. And you even went and worked at Nelson Mandela University, CCI, focus in vocational education and training as a researcher. So many things that you have done. I want people to understand that Uthando also sits in a number of boards, one of which is the Institute for Economic and Social Research. And is it Arts and Culture or SACO that you
It's SACO.
Can you just say the name of the board? Sorry.
I'm on the project steering committee for the South African Cultural Observatory.
So if there's anyone other than the fact that he's a chief curator of the Repatriation Arts Museum, which is now a precinct without walls, that as a result of the changes and the evolution that had taken place, it's now a precinct without walls. So this is why Uthando went to actually travel and go and rub shoulders with Macron in France. And before you continue, I just wanted people to have a sense of the kind of scope of your contribution and your participation within the art fraternity across board. Do you want to say more about that French?
I mean, I think it was one of as a curator, obviously one of your dreams is to
the Louvre.
Is to visit the Louvre and see the masterpieces firsthand. And for that dream to be fulfilled, it's just unbelievable and so awesome. And more than anything, also, I mean, it was a very intense program. You have 12 professionals, a very competitive program. So hence, it gets prestige because it's driven by the French presidency, but run by the French through the French Ministry of Culture. So the selection process is quite rigorous. But being part of that group of 12 professionals from across Africa was very exciting, because one realized that yes, Africa has a lot of its challenges, but you have a lot of dedicated people across the continent who are, sort of focused on telling a different narrative of Africa, trying to understand our past, to try and make sense of it in the present, and to try to bring the past to the present, so that we are able to, forge a better future. I think. One cannot really underestimate the role arts and culture can play in terms of shaping the Africa that is to come. Because a lot of the value or that Africa brings is really embedded within our culture. It's who we are, how we operate, how we engage. So for me, it was so heartwarming to be with these professionals, and to experience this program with them, and to get to know them, and get to know that in fact wherever you are in the continent, we are facing similar issues of how do we create access, how do we transform these colonial collections to make sense of this new collection of the new heritage that emerges in the post-colonial context. So we were grappling with these issues, and the residue of the colonial dominance is so still permeates so much of African society. That it becomes then crucial that we transform these institutions that tell the story of Africa, so that it permeates other components of our society, so that people can start really imagining a new Africa that is not embroiled in strife and suffering and war, and the story of Africa is not just about colonial dispossession, but it's a story that is much richer and textured, and I think for me, this program really brought in. It was very ironic that you had to go to French, to France to connect on that level. So I'm very excited, about the possibilities that being part of this network of professionals brings, because I always say that you must always work in a local context, but with a very global outlook in terms of because. We can, have global impact from doing something here in Gqeberha. We don't necessarily have to go to Joburg or Cape Town to be able to do that. So I feel very excited. When you experience a program like this, you come back very energized. And it came at a very awkward place, because an awkward time of the year, because we're heading towards the end of the year. You're starting to feel the lethargy of the year. You're like, oh my God.
But also during the same period, there was also the World Cup, and you cover that side. But to tell me, do these conflicts of like the global South, global North, Africa, Europe, historical conflicts, especially in the arts and culture space, emerge in such spaces? How do you deal with how awkward, if it really becomes awkward with those kind of conversation? I know that you can't speak art in France and not actually come across that.
Definitely. I mean, I think the conceptualization of the program is really what was at the heart of it, is about how do we try to talk about repatriation of artifacts and cultural goods that reside in a lot of European institutions, and we had very uncomfortable conversations. I think Museum Bromley, where it houses all the antiquities from Africa and the Latin America and Oceania, or so sort of what we would term as indigenous cultures. All of those art antiquities were moved from the Louvre to the separate museum was created to house all of these indigenous world cultures. And that raises questions as well. How are you starting to value ancient cultures? And what was very interesting as well when you were encountering what we picked up as Africans is that when you speak of civilization, there Egypt is very much featured as part of civilization, but yet that Egypt is divorced from Africa. It's without context. So I mean, those are some interesting, tough conversations that we're having and talking about. But at the heart of it, I think, is about how do we move on, or how do we. How do we engage with the thing? Because it's very hard to erase history, but how do you tell a textured, a more nuanced, a more complex, a more layered history that is able to surface people's own agencies, people's complexity, because the native informer, for instance, as a character in history, is a complex one. So for me, we can't erase those histories, but rather how do we engage with them in such a way that raises questions about the past in the present, so that we can better make sense. Because we cannot underestimate the role of the past in informing the present that we are in, and the role it plays in also shaping the future, because it's those histories that keep us in our separate boxes, in our separate enclaves. But how do in telling these textual stories, we are able to break down some of these barriers. So I think, at the heart of it, it was very interesting questions, because one guy from Egypt made a very interesting argument, saying it's like, no, let them keep it. We don't want these artifacts back. In fact, which all of I think it was a very interesting opinion. Not that I necessarily agree with him, but I think it raises a very important point. It's like, if we take all of these artifacts, we're going to keep them.
Maintenance, security.
At that practical level, it becomes, it's like, can we actually, keep them? Okay, are we ready to take them back? And do even people care that we have them back? I think that is an even more interesting question. How do we make people care to that they want it back? So that we create meaning in the now, here, for an object that was taken 400 or 500 years ago. So I think these are the interesting questions for me that we need to be having and talking about, and really trying to unpack what does repatriation mean, or of cultural objects and artifacts.
Because this question also appears differently in some of these academic bursaries, where you have, say, a colonial person like Rhodes, who's now merged with the Mandela, and instead of maybe paying back or giving back whatever, they then take up a group of African students and all of the maybe a mixture, so that they can benefit going forward. I'm not sure of the politics, and I know that so many people have benefited through that way of doing things. Because I'm not going to lie, I also, as much as I know that let's take everything back, the upkeeping of everything that we take, the security, sometimes it happens that there's fire that sort of burns our archives, and sometimes it happens that people come and I don't want to be the wrong kind of a darky here, and say that we cannot maintain. But these are real questions that we have to actually deal with in order to move forward.
That gave me pause as well. I'm a strong proponent of obviously return everything that was stolen. But when you look at the practicalities thereof, there are other ways of doing it.
How can we do it differently.
How can you do it?
And ningasebenzi imani ngokulwa engage sincedisane.
I think we have to have a hard conversations. As I said, I'm saying now myself is I'm like everything must come back, but we have to then understand how can we do it in a practical sense. I mean, I think one of the other mechanisms I think that we looked at as part of the program is this issue of temporary exhibitions. How do we loan, but they can. I mean, there's a lot of arrangements that you would take a permanent loan, blah blah blah, or temporary loan, a loan for 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, whatever scenario that you can reach. But I think for me, it's about creating sustainability, really, creating capacity, skills transfer. It's about skills transfer. How can we this process build and not be an opportunity to fight, but rather it's a building exercise. I mean, I think the French are quite blatant about this whole program. They're like, they want to increase French influence in the world. And I mean, I was just like, gave me a pause. I'm like, this sounds very neo-colonial
You get that from the
culture.
German as well. It's deliberate. Is that, look, we are going out there. The Americans also do this with these joint programs where they literally come and say, come and spend time. We want to see, you have to be assimilated into the culture.
Yeah, sure.
Other places, you can't even go and get a visa unless and stay there and be naturalized unless you go through some kind of acculturation and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a real interest.
It's I mean, it was shocking, but at the same time, I think it's an opportunity. I mean, we had also, as part of the group, we had a real conversation around this issue. We felt it was very blatant, but okay, cool, French influence. But I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. We have to view it in a more nuanced way, and also be very critical of and engage with that influence, because I think when we speak of influence, it's not a one-way thing.
Africa cannot touch you and remain the same anyway.
Exactly.
The same way that you cannot be touched by another group of people and remain the same. Now that you've met an African, you will not remain the same.
No, and the African influence is quite real. I mean, in Paris, which was for me quite a very interesting, because there's a certain, I don't know how to explain it, but there's a certain sense of Africa in some places there, which was quite interesting for me to see, and sort of the juxtaposition of this like colonial, one of the oldest ancient cities in Europe. But embedded with that, even pre-colonial, there's Africa, the traces of African influence on European culture was startling to me, and I didn't quite expect it in such a visual way. You see it in some of the architecture, traces of the Moor in the background. There's this other woman who's also doing a very interesting a dissertation on the appearance of the black or the black figure within mid-century paintings in Paris, and it's a fascinating study because I think we went to one exhibition that celebrates it was the 50th anniversary of Picasso's death. And it was the most mind-blowing experience. I mean, Picasso's legacy now, of course, very complicated, and when people are realizing he was not such a nice person, and which is for me not a big surprise, because most artists, have a lot of personality. But I mean,
eccentric. Is it the term? I think it's eccentricism.
But I mean, I think what was very interesting with that exhibition, you have this master Picasso. Painting one of the most recognizable art in the world, really. And this exhibition was so interesting because it was really focusing on his process. So the studies, the drawings, the sketches that he did for a lot of the big works that we know and love. But even in that, you see, how it was very interesting how they curated it, because you could see the African influence there.
Yes, I saw a documentary like that where now the masks, the African masks, started to actually appear in his artwork, in his style, in his landuk, which is fundamentally what we understand as a Picasso art.
Now, which is so. I think what made me realize, I think, having his first time in Europe, I've been elsewhere, but I think Europe is really different because you're going to Paris and the art is just is in sharp focus there, whereas in other countries maybe not so much. But what it's brought for me is that we all are so always focused on the European influence upon Africa. Fundamentally, it's so visceral, the Africa's influence on Europe. Before I went there, I heard this former Minister of Education in Nigeria, and she was speaking at one of these World Economic Forum things, and she was talking about how Europe, this main engagement with Africa is always on issues of immigration. It's always about people wanting to go live and work in Europe, and she was saying that, look, that's such an outdated way of engaging with Africa. These bureaucrats or diplomats that are there need to be taken out, because the diplomats of Europe back then, they missed the rise of China, and because they had such a very myopic view of China. And she's arguing that, look, what is not very visible, but it's starting to be visible, and it was clear to me when I saw it as well, is that the influence and the impact of Africa. And she was saying, the rise of Africa will be through its young people, women, and technology are going to be the key drivers of Africa's development. And I mean, my mind was blown, and I kept thinking about it when I was there. But when we're engaging in these platforms, I mean, I think we went to this very interesting forum that was for focus on sort of the intersection between technology and art. And in that space, like a lot of Africans were there dominating, especially Kenya, East Africa, doing Rwanda as well. Those guys are doing amazing stuff with VR technology, like advanced stuff in Africa. And I was like, that woman was right, actually. You feel it, even here from Kabeja, I feel that sense of, this.
It's an African century.
You know what I mean? It's like, it feels very cliche to say, but we are really the ones. It might not even been us, but that they were waiting for. But maybe it's the next generation. But I feel like we've suddenly the foundation is there for something different. I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard to now, to see that we sort of future, because we're experiencing so much, economic downturn. There's a lot of stress happening. The economy is depressed across Africa. But I mean, I think on the flip side of that, it's how we are coping and being resilient within that context that people need to really look at, to really start seeing the sort of these seeds of I'm excited about Africa so much that and when I see how we are really shaping some of the global conversations, we really need to start sort of shifting our own paradigm. I'm not only
thinking of secondary international citizens. Actually, we are driving.
We are driving the conversations, the global
culture.
We are driving a lot of these things. I mean, one can just look at Afrobeat as an example of how it permeates. I mean, you have one of the biggest, pop stars in America, Justin Bieber, Selena Gomez, collaborating and working with African artists. So I really feel that we need to shift our paradigm and not so much focus on the first world influence on the continent, but rather how we are driving the global agenda, and I think if we need to really own those spaces, and I've seen how other Africans who have, for whose lighters, they've seen the light and be like, hey, wait, we are actually pushing this thing.
Yeah.
And
shit. Yeah, that's what we I want to say something here. There's a book, you remind me of a book. I read this book because Thabo recommended it. And at the time, he said, whoever reads and finishes the book and reviews it, then that person is going to have a dinner with him. I was like, I'm going to look for this book. I got it through library transfer. It got to Nelson Mandela University. The title is Africa That Never Was. 400 years, 4 centuries of African writing by Europeans. One of the main writer is Jeblo, a person by the name Jeblo. There are 4 writers there. What it says essentially is that, when the Europeans left whatever they had and whoever they were then to come and explore in Africa, that was for them an act of wanting to conquer the world, and they discovered Africa in whatever whatever correct history is, and then they wrote about what they saw as now settlers. This king does this, a barren land here, no one is occupying this, painting scores of unoccupied land, communicating that back home and all of that. For 400 years, most of the initial African writing before the early 1900s was actually covered by Europeans about Africa. Of course, now we know that in 1823, the first Xhosa words were transcribed in all of that. But 400 years before then was this kind of a literature, and that's what they still consume. That's where the stereotypes largely emanate from, because they have seen Africa through their own people writing about their own stereotypes, looking at us.
Yeah.
And then now, but at the end of the book, which is what you are referring to, is that this guy says that, look, we know as European, we thought that we are civilizing these savages in a way. But what has actually happened is that we just woken up a sleeping giant, because now when Africa wakes up and touches the whole and other parts of the world, those parts of the world will never change, will never remain the same. Yeah. And now I feel like we are that giant now that has actually had our foot in all the global spaces where we need to be, and we won't leave it without it transforming into our own selves. That's what this conversation reminds me about. But because of this conversation now, we normally ask people where they are, but how much of their upbringing has affected or has given cues for them to be doing the art that you are doing, to be doing the work that you are doing. What can you look back at in your younger years, your family upbringing, schooling, that has actually led to the Uthando that we now have in front of us?
Well, I'm one of those kids, that were forward, growing up. I was always one of those kids. I mean, I think I literally said my first full sentence at 2, always I had, the youngest in my class, always. So I've always, been the youngest kid with the older kids from like a schooling kind of a situation. And so that really forced me to grow up quite quickly. It was a good and a bad thing, I guess, looking back. Because I was still a kid, but yet, engaging with very adult things. But I mean, I think, I come from a family of teachers and nurses, and, they're, middle class kind of black person. And I think the values that I take from my family, I think, and I grew up with a very strong sense of family, which was quite lucky because every holiday would be at my grandmother's, all the kids, all the cousins. So we grew up like that.
Is it Alwa North now? Because you always go to Alwa North.
And it's still like that now.
We say Alwa North.
So Alwa North is really our sort of our North Star, or our North, our true North as a family. Because even now, my grandparents obviously passed on. A lot of, my father's big family has got 6 brothers and 1 sister. So all of the kids, we all grew up together. So I'm lucky in that sense. I grew up with a very strong sense of family. And it was only it's always in retrospect that you really appreciate that. When you see that other family, other kids didn't have that, so I'm now more appreciative because growing up was always very suffocating because you're always all together and you just want your nuclear family, but our parents were always like, no, every holiday everybody is together. But now what's so nice is that we are still continuing those traditions. But I think obviously very conservative. I mean, my grandfather was a priest. So arty was it's like, huh?
So there's no other art enthusiast.
Well, I think I sort of blazed the trail. So a lot of the art people now coming after me because I mean in high school I was an actor. I did speech and drama as an extra subject. And everybody thought I was going to be into theater and get into acting, but my father was like, and I actually got into University of Pretoria for a BA drama degree, and then my father was like, Uthando, arty is a hobby. So I started a career. Hence, I did BA politics. It was a very sulky. I was very upset.
You change immediately after that one again.
I was like, but I still find my way back into an art space. So I think for me, art has always been art. And it's very interesting that now I'm sort of in the visual arts, but initially it was performing arts. So I've been always really very creative person, very expressive. And I think, and I'm lucky that my family, was never tried to,
to stop I want to ask something about because now I'm sitting with Uthando. What is art in the context of Africans who always bayachokoza, banye bayazipenda red? There's always something happening with the hair, There's always a carving of something that is now what you would regard as a normal, day activity. Sometimes other people put that like beads work, beading or whatever. They now want to put value and put it on some, on some, pedestal and actually put money and as a value to actually describe its worth. How do you think about art in that sense?
A very, 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 very a deep question. No, not an easy answer. But I'll give you my.
But I figured you should get these questions. Because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I think for me, obviously, our understanding of art is art practice or art. It's very much informed by a Western kind of view because paintings and how value has been attached to all of that. I'm talking just the contemporary art space as and then how then does a black artist navigate that art space, and then create value from who they are, in a sense. It's the question that I think you are getting to. I think for us as Black people, for me, my own approach to it is just understanding that art was never separate from who we are, because with the beads and played sort of dual functions in our life. They were an adornment to display, to show where are you, your stages of life. You're a kid, you're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a maiden, you're an elder. So it's also it really was a tool to codify our culture in a way. But so from an aesthetic and a view, it's we always appreciated it, because even though we are expressing a cultural practice, the aestheticness of it on its own, I think, was always there, and there's always value attached to the carver. Because there was a firm belief that especially if you look at especially in Nigerian culture, sort of the Igbo, that the person, the carver, must just dream the carving. So there's a very strong link between the ritual and adornment. But this is not to say that ritual or adornment, the aesthetic value of adornment was never appreciated. But in the African context, the lines between that were so blurry and so the same, so different, that for me, that is the value that is created by that person. So there's always a value attached to the process of dominance. The person who's doing the beads, that's a very high sort of honored person. Not everybody would be nomhlotli wear beads, and not everybody would be a carver. Hence the sort of spiritualness of it. So families would then go to that person. So it was not a free exercise.
There was value that was attributed to it.
And there's a transaction. So the carver would be given a whatever mode of currency that was used at the time. So this notion that for in an African context, art is just about culture. I think for me it's a very narrow view, or a very narrow understanding of the role of art within and its embeddedness in the life and the cultural life of people. But because there are a lot of things within cultural practice that don't have art. It's about just the practice. So this conflation of art and culture, for me, that's what we really need to maybe make more complex in our understanding.
Yeah, to really engage and because we have been introduced to art as a form of play. Esikolweni mina ngikhumula sidlala ngodongo. Banokwenzani anything ngodongo, that was play. Anything that we did emhlabeni ngase Buffalo River in King William Star where I grew up. Excuse me. All of that was associated with play. But now I'm interacting with these museums, and I'm hearing people talking about the fact that even Tina as Xhosas, like we do not have factories that manufacture beads, and in South Africa or in the Eastern Cape at least, I don't know. And then now where did we get the beads? If you can, I remember being told that some of them come from India and Germany and China and all of that. And then now, where do Africans or Xhosas, in your own sort of thinking, where do we start forming that as culture? Because it's an important one. that even today, there are certain things that we can come across, the technology question that you were raising, and we can make it African.
You look, sorry.
No. Yes.
We cannot. I'm not. I don't worry about where the beads come from too much, because I have an understanding that. Shaka Lam. I don't know if you watched the series Shaka.
I haven't, but I think
it was very interesting. I mean, never mind the visuals, the beauty, the aesthetic beauty of the series. But they, for me, crystallized or showed something that people don't quite understand. It was that. These kings that operated were very advanced negotiators and traders. Trade just doesn't start when the Europeans got here. So the beads were traveling right through Africa for millennia.
Yes.
From right through from Morocco, all those trade routes, the Great Zimbabwe, so it's the
We've
trade
been part of a global community
for millennia, for millennia. So and hence even though that they get then so the beads then, like for instance, the cowrie shells used to be a currency because of their scarcity in another part of Africa. You know what I mean. So it's those kind of global trade routes that have been happening for millennia, that are linked to issues of migration, the weather, people, all these different epochs in our time have shaped how most of our cultures emerge, because and I think that for me crystallizes the very nature of how cultures operate, is that they never stay the same. And I think what often happens in our study of history, there's an assumption that we want to crystallize, or we want to go back to
the pre and epoch.
But it's just not. It's not about that. It's really about trying to understand, what happened then. How did those beads get there? What are the histories that are attached to that? Because it's issues of trade, it's migration, it's war, it's deportation, it's slavery, it's assimilation, it's merging of tribes, it's the breaking of tribes. It's so complex, and each time that happens, so to create yourself a distinction from the other tribe, you'd add a few beads to show by now you are not part of that group, but so it's all of these like textures, things that happen over time and space that shape the kind of cultural practice that you see today.
So then we have full right to take on what we have been given as culture, as evolving as it is, not static, and actually interpret it and take it into the next 50 years, the next 100 years, and knowing very well that even our ancestors actually did the same with what they were given, with the world around them. They were able to do so much with what was around them. But then now, again, I'm sitting with Uthando Baduza, a Chief Curator of the Repatriation Museum, but the art has always had some form of a conflict and some difficult conversation that it's trying to address, and it has not really been all rosy and without any challenges. I don't want to use the term blemish, challenges. I want to find out, how does he deal with that as somebody who, I've heard the phrase that Nelson Mandela Bay is a hub of art, is a hub of culture in the country. Now, how do you, in your current work, work to realize this kind of a vision, this kind of a tag that I am going to wear very boldly that we are the hub of culture. As someone who's a chief curator,
I think in my own space, I think what I've been really trying to do, and it's taken a long time, is to work with like-minded people, to establish firm collaborations with like-minded individuals that are sort of share the same vision. I think my focus has really about, and especially the work of the gallery and the precinct, has just really, we haven't had access to our building for a very long time, but we had to think very dynamically about our work, to say, okay, cool, we don't have the buildings. Then how what are we supposed to do? But then, so we just went back to the mandate. What is our mandate? Our mandate is to deliver arts and cultural services to the community of Gqeberha, and particularly museum and gallery services to the people. So what do those do? Is conserve, preserve, educate, exhibit. I think largely that is the core functions of these institutions. So that helped us create then, this is what you were referring to, a precedent without walls, understanding our work that fundamentally, even if we had the buildings, our work would not be limited to the buildings.
Because it won't be big enough.
So that helped us then in our own thinking to say, in fact, that's a precedent. We should dismantle these walls ourselves in our own thinking about our work. And then that has helped us then to really focus on projects that on the one hand promote participation within the arts and culture space, but also I think this is the key of the mandate that I primarily focus on the most is this issue of development. How do we create opportunities for and I think this is very much informed by my work in the vocational education space, understanding that not everybody's pathway is a degree or a qualification or a certificate. But so how can we create other forms of learning or alternative forms of education and training that will enable people to then move to this next level of excellence? And so our mandate is about participation, it's about development, it's about excellence. So I've really been wanting to invest a lot of energy and time in this developmental space, so how do we transition the artists that we work with into this excellence space, and hence I feel and I've seen how Gqeberha has really been a breeding ground or a training ground for a lot of the artists that you see and living and working across the country right now. And it's not just limited to the visual arts, but it's from the theatre component, from the music, hence and I think we have a lot of work to do to bring sort of the national stage to Gqeberha, so that people can really see them firsthand, the kind of just white hot creativity that is happening. I mean, if you look at just the poetry space, how it's just in the last 2-3 years has transformed and been activated, and it was a space that was dead a few years ago. So there's always something coming up, and the opening of different spaces, the one room and others, as really you start seeing then this creative hubness, and you start also seeing a lot of these national artists coming and doing performances in Gqeberha. And also being like, wow, we didn't know. And meanwhile, we've known. I think we have a lot of work to do to open up the city to the different people, so that people can see, what we're trying to build here. And I think for me, what I've realized is that often all of these things take time. It's only now, 5 years later, like one of our flagship, for as an example, sketchbook.
Yes, there was an aspect.
We're doing it for the 5th time now. And it's not an Uthando project. It's a city project, because there's so many hands that have made it. I mean, we conceptualized the project with Mkondo Kwazele and Zukile Valisa. They were involved for the 2 years, but there were others involved in the 2 years after that. And this year, some of the guys came back. And I've always seen that this project will go on way after I'm gone as well, or have left the municipality, because it has to be a commitment from the city to ensure that we are able to provide opportunities for development of our artists. We must ensure that we do provide opportunities for our artists to exhibit their works. And also to as I always say, act in a local way, but have a very global outlook and approach.
And you've had also, what do you call these things where our artists go to America?
I mean, I think that
yes.
it stems from that, and we've also had, as you've said, international exhibition exchanges, and where we've had our artists go to our cities, has a partner, a sister city arrangement with Jacksonville, Jacksonville in Florida, in the United States. And then again, it was a hard, back and forth and trying to understand what we really wanted to do, but we managed to get our artists' work to there, and their artists' work to here, and get some artists to go to America, and everybody always says, well, I mean, why would you go for such a big project? You're just a small municipal gallery. You're like, no. We have to be global in our outlook, because Gqeberha is part of the world,
yes.
And we've seen it time and time again that anyone has the potential to have a big voice in the world if they're willing to work hard enough. And I think that's what I've always said to all the different projects that I've done, because we've worked in different spaces, from the visual and the craft space, and now we're doing a lot of work, investing a lot of time and energy around beading, and trying to sort of create a craft hub. There's a lot of initiatives that we are doing, and we've been sort of over the years trying different models in terms of trying to create this hub space. And currently we have one that will receive the cruise liner linked to
the opening of the season. I saw some of the images there.
So, but we are seeing that we say using that as a catalyst, but at the same time, so that's the global component. But our focus is still local. So how can we sustain the local thing once the ships are gone? How to ensure that this thing keeps going? Hence this always for me important of acting global. Acting in a local context, but having a global outlook in your approach. So I think that's really been what I've tried to push in my projects. Is that we really need to work hard. And dedicate. If you're saying you're an artist, then dedicate time and energy and effort. And my passion has always been to then, as a curator, create that enabling environment for artists to deliver the best work that they can.
And then you talked about the beading workshops that you have and the hub you're creating. I know, and I've heard actually, that the Nelson Mandela Bay Art Museum, they have a huge collection of like long, old beads, and Uthando was speaking somewhere, and then he mentioned this, and that most of it was bought from the church, or was taken, or was donated by the churches, where people gave their beads when they changed into Christianity. And all their beadwork and everything. I don't know if we need a sermon out on that.
The bead story is long. And
it's long. But you know the question, because the question that I want to ask around bead now, is there another move, maybe not to only do them one by one like it has been done for quite a long time now, into more putting it into technology, a more mechanized way of doing it? Are you thinking that way?
It's a conversation, but I think no.
The value is in the person
in the making,
putting their DNA in it.
because it's a traditional way of doing it. So it's about not trying to lose that craft, because the Chinese are already doing it. The sort of mechanized beads. You see all the traditional. You see they've.
I haven't seen it.
You can get really cheap beads now because of that. They've found a way to mechanize the making of African beads, which is crazy. I mean, the Chinese can copy anything, but it's crazy. But we're not there. But I think for me,
they're making me pack the cheap and everything is cheap. The material is cheap. And everything is like.
So you see,
I go there to just get a quick. Traditional attire, just
so I think that's what we're trying to do.
I shouldn't.
We're trying to create that distinction. No, this is not to say that because some of these items are obviously quite expensive, and want to create broader access, but also you don't want to lose the quality and authenticity, the history that is associated with the practice. I think one of the conversations that we've been having with our master beaders is how do we manage this tension or this relationship between the past and present. And the project that we did with the master beaders really did that way. So it was a collaboration between ourselves and the art museum, and one of the things we did was to look at the past and try to understand the history behind some of these beads, and try to talk about the master beaders were tasked to replicate a piece choose from the collection, and replicate a piece and try to understand its history. What was it used for? Where is it from? And there's also a perception that it's like all the beads are the same, and then they're not. The Hlubi beads are a bit different from the Vengus. Whereas the Vengus and Hlubis are the same time, but how and also the where, in sort of geography, the beads will also be very different. The styles, the sort of the patterns, the size of the bead. So it's all these things are also dependent on the availability of material. So these things are not also about when people wanted it that way. It's like the beads that are available. It's a whole complex history that we have to understand. That year, Kwafika beads is the red beads, for instance, and all of a sudden you start seeing the red beads. You know what I mean? So it's not a one simple narrative. I think also what we're trying to do with this project, or trying to create a cohort of master beaders, is really to pass on the tradition. So we want them to train other young people, because all of these things. I mean, if you talk about it in a ritual sense, for instance, there has to be a traditional healer to who's specific. Yes. That is a very rare skill, and it's very hard to find mama that does that. And when you do find them, they are fully booked. I don't know when I did mine. By the time we went to pick her up, she was already taken by another family. Whereas I'd arranged, she thought, because of Mama Mdala, she thought it was us picking her up. When she realized, I'm at the wrong house. Yeah. This is not my first appointment. Yeah. So she only came like later. So we don't want to get to a situation where we lose some of those skills of being able to totally insimbi, and where we have to search for people to practice who we are. You know what I mean? So it's critical that we don't lose touch. And I think we had a very interesting mix of people in the program. Sort of older mamas and some younger kids. And so the second part of the thing was to look at, the contemporary space. How do we make beads contemporary? And I think what we're also trying to destabilize is this notion that beads are like, but they have aesthetic beauty and that has value. And in terms of the art space, also, they always have sort of a lower value as opposed to an object or artifact from Europe with a similar sort of history would have more value. So these are the kind of larger conversations we still need to have around how we value our own objects, and our need not to go to Trajonamo. I'm not guilty of the same thing. I don't lie, but
no, I see a lot of people there on a Saturday morning. It's late.
If you want a quick job.
I don't know something. If would it help to sort of profile these master beaders?
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had a category called master beaders. So I'm learning as well. Would it help to know that if we wanted this umamklane lona basically value yakhe yena uzawuthi pha 10,000 amathawu athile, then but we know the value of the beadwork is at this level as it is, as we understand now. But then we know when we're actually looking for that particular, as you would look for a particular artist as opposed to another one, particular painting as opposed to another one. Maybe briefly, we're about to close, but briefly, do you think that will help?
I mean, it's already there. It's already there because it's always the value of the beadwork is always about the number of beads you use, how big it is, how complicated is the style, and there's a lot of innovation as well now that then pushes the value up. So that's already there. I think there's a certain, I guess, unspoken values that in terms of the value, but I think this is what we're really trying to do through this project is to have these conversations around how do we do, what is an adequate price for a statement piece, how do we ensure that the value that a Mam Dlamini whatever does and the level which she does it at, that value is recognized and is universally recognized. Not just recognized here, but it can translate in any space. And I think that's the challenge. I don't think we're quite there yet. But in terms of creating value, I think we are well on our way.
Okay. Seza ugqiba uthetha no-Uthando Baduza, interesting work. But then I want to ask him one question before he concludes. If you were to curate an exhibition, a South African cultural exhibition, focusing on our beadwork, artwork, any artifacts that we have, in 2 minutes, who is where in the country that has to be part of that exhibition? I know.
Are you being serious?
So curate your own South African show.
Oh no, you can't do this to me.
Even art, even painting, visual art.
Oh my God.
Anything.
Oh no.
Okay, do you want to skip that one?
No. Well, yes, I think I want to skip that one, but I mean I think that there's a lot of interesting and exciting voices that one can easily acknowledge.
Yeah.
You have I think I'm going to focus on Quebec artists that are quite exciting. You have Temale Tumangonyana, known as Zala, who's exhibiting and showing in London and doing amazing stuff. Bongani Njalo, who's doing quite incredibly as well.
Yes, Bongani.
Atipatra Huga, who is not necessarily Eastern PE, but is Eastern Cape. You have Nicholas Hlobo, who's quite exciting. He's done amazing, also Eastern Cape born and bred artist. So I think there's a number. I think my focus, I would really focus on Eastern Cape. I think there's interesting, exciting voices. that one can bring in from not necessarily Eastern Cape, but from Xhosa. I mean, you have a Buhle Siwani, who's quite exciting. Nomabusa Mkhobo. I mean, there's just so many. Laude who's also Eastern Cape.
Yes, in Cape Town
he
as
was in
well.
Cape Town, but he was from here. I mean, he studied here, but he's actually from Mthatha. You have Sonabuso Mai.
I think of his artwork, the bovine Dondon.
Yeah. I mean, exciting stuff.
Stock, I think.
Yeah, we have Bantu Mchiselwa, who's always made such intricate sort of
From
experiment.
Germany, he's still present.
He's
He's locally rooted. Yes.
We have Banela Njadai, who's just like.
Yes.
So I mean, I think I would create a PE show, and really show people, we are a Eastern Cape show, and not just limited to PE, but and show people why the Eastern Cape really has and continues to show or produce amazing artists that have had a significant impact on the South African national art landscape.
Outside South Africa, where would you place that show in the world?
I think I'll focus on the diaspora. In a diasporic sense, it's saying that, I think there's very exciting stuff that is happening on the continent. I think I would take it in the continent firstly. Nigeria, Kenya are very exciting art spaces at the moment. And then maybe Brazil, I think would be quite a good space for it. Sao Paulo, Rio are good spaces. And maybe Mexico as well, like in Cuba.
I see a big Thank you so much. We have Uthando Baduza. It has been great to sit down with him and talk about all things art in the Eastern Cape and South Africa. But I want him to conclude. Any concluding remarks for someone who wants to do art, who wants to learn, who wants to connect?
Yeah. I mean, I think I wanted to pick up on what you were saying about, the discomfort that art often creates, and I revel in that, because it produces a certain level of honesty, or it has a transformative effect when you are confronted with something that makes you uncomfortable. And you realize, actually, I'm uncomfortable at this, but you were not aware that certain thing makes you uncomfortable. Then you have to ask yourself, why is it uncomfortable? And I mean, I think for me, that what excites me about art. I mean, even the teaching of art is very contested.
How do you teach it?
I mean, and I think I love the fact that it's contested because it speaks to its very nature. I mean, I saw this very simple thing on YouTube. I just like, but consumption of art, you either hate it, you either love it, or you are indifferent to it. And I think that's what it is. it really is. And people think that because I'm indifferent to it, it means that I have no reaction to it, but your indifference is a reaction. So I think for me, that's what excites me about art, and just the pursuit of creativity and beauty, and the pursuit of beauty, and just being excited by people that not just in the visual space, but across the disciplines that are trying to think about our world in imaginative and in fantastical ways, and trying to bring healing and peace and joy, and ask difficult questions about the kind of society that we live in, and reflect ourselves. They reflect us in ways that we might not even be willing to see. And for me, I think that are exciting. So I'm really passionate about how do we get to a space where we can expose as many young people to art as possible, especially within our communities, Black communities, because trust me, if a kid goes to a museum or an art space or a theater or a play, when they're young, they're more likely then to buy a ticket to see somebody perform when they're adults. So it just breaks my heart that we're not investing. We don't see that this value. So much is money and energy is being thrown into other things, but we don't invest in the holistic development of the Black child, and I think we're really doing them a disservice. And hence, my passion is to ensure that any project that I do, those people that we empower must empower others, and create that tidal wave of creativity, because it's we have to get them while they're young, and create those opportunities, because it's not impossible. And I think with the right kind of energies and creativity and the right people at the right place at the right time, we're going to see the value. I mean, I think research is already telling us that, you know, if you want smart, well-developed, rounded people, you cannot discount their creative and art development is critical to their cognitive thinking. You need to develop all the senses, all the in terms of the holistic development of the Black child, and I think we need to do more to work in that space, and I certainly will continue doing it.
If he doesn't get an honorary professorship somewhere, associate professorship, and all of that, because of this closing remark, I don't know. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you having taken time to come and sit down with us and talk about your work. It's really interesting, and really this is where you build characters and people. This is where you also inspire people to know that whatever little that I've done, actually tomorrow is going to be a little bit bigger, one step at a time. And we've seen some of your people, you know, developing and creating better art day by day because of the training and the environment you've provided in the department in Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, and the work broadly with the galleries and the people you've mentioned as well, who also are practitioners in the field of art. Thank you so much, and sawubonana next time, next Monday.